even at a national level. It's not difficult to get involved, and it's surely not difficult to accelerate your career. That I would not have the job that I have today if it were not for, those steps in ENA, going all the way back to that dot group and my name being drawn out of a hat. So cool. I'm so grateful.
Hello, and welcome to the Art of Emergency Nursing podcast. This is where we share stories for inspiration, entertainment, and encouragement, because we all know emergency nurses have the best stories. Now here's your host, Kevin McFarland.
Hey everybody, Kevin McFarland here from the Art of Emergency Nursing. And as always, I got to remind you to smash that follow button. Make sure you're following the podcast so that you catch all the new episodes as they come out. And if you haven't done so already, please leave a rating and review. Let us know how we're doing here, and tell people what you like about the show. That's going to help someone like you find someone like me. So I would appreciate that. Now, today's episode is a little self-serving, but I bet you're going to get something out of this too. I recently was asked by a former mentor and a friend to write a letter of recommendation for somebody who is going to apply to be in the Academy of Emergency Nursing. Now, if you don't know much about the Academy, this may be a great episode for you. The Academy of Emergency Nursing is an incredible organization that you or someone you know may get an opportunity to join at some point. So if you've ever thought about joining the Academy, being an Academy member, or if you've ever been asked to write a letter, this episode is for you. My guest today was Nick Chmielewski, and he is the current chair of the Academy of Emergency Nursing, and he shares with us a little bit about the application process, what it's all about, and who is somebody that should be thinking about putting in an application for the Academy. Now, I want to make a quick disclaimer and say that the opinions and the views shared on this podcast are mine and Nick's alone. They don't represent the organizations we work for, the organizations we are part of. It's just a couple of guys talking, and Nick was kind enough to answer my call when I called him and asked him for a little bit of advice. And you get to reap the benefits. So I really hope you enjoy this episode with my friend, Nick.
Well, Nick, I need some help, dude. I need your help. I have been asked to write a letter of recommendation for somebody who is applying to be in the Academy. And I don't even know where to start, dude. This is an amazing nurse, great nurse. I think she's a perfect fit for the Academy, but I just don't know where to start with this process. So I figured I'd hit you up for a little advice of one, tell me a little bit about kind of what you guys look for the Academy. But first, what I'd like to do with share with the audience, like, what is the Academy? What are we doing here?
Yeah. So the Academy of Emergency Nursing, ENA, the board of directors of ENA established the Academy in 2004 to honor emergency nurses who have made enduring and substantial contributions to the specialty of emergency nursing. And the Academy is responsible for providing visionary leadership to ENA, which is a little bit different than the board responsibility, obviously, which is fiduciary to govern the association. Yeah, the business. But visionary leadership is right in the purpose of the Academy. We also have a mission and a vision. Our mission of the Academy is to recognize and promote significant sustained excellence in emergency nursing in collaboration with ENA. And our vision is to be a dynamic, collaborative partnership, fostering excellence, advocacy, and research in emergency nursing and promoting the development of nursing leaders. To date, since the founding of the Academy, we've inducted over 200 people into the Academy. Yeah. And there's actually 3 different categories of fellowships that people can be inducted into. The most common is an active fellow, which I believe is probably what you're talking about. But we also have posthumous fellows, a category for the ENA member has deceased. And now there's a group of people that are trying to recognize their significant and enduring contributions. Nice. And then we also have an honorary fellowship category, which is intended actually for non-nurses that have made significant and enduring contributions to the specialty of emergency nursing. And we inducted our first non-nurse into the Academy back in 2021. So just recently. And that's Carolyn Jones.
Nice.
That directed and did the film, In Case of Emergency. And I should note it was not just because of that film, which won tons of awards, but also the totality of the work that she did in promoting not just, the specialty of emergency nursing, but also general nursing with the, yeah. So
that's very cool.
I think another way to look at it for the Academy is it's kind of the pinnacle honorific for an emergency nurse. There is the Lifetime Achievement Award that ENA has, but that goes to one person a year. There's no quota that exists for the Academy. We evaluate every application that we receive on its merits, and we could induct anywhere from 0 people a year to as high as the number of applications that we receive. Wow. So although the number, to my recollection, at least, has not been 0 since its founding. But that is a possibility. It really comes down to the merits of what's in the application. Nice. So I think your question was, what do I do or how do I write this letter? And my first question for you would be, this person is applying themselves and they asked you to write the letter. Is that correct?
Correct. So like, I can't just like nominate somebody. I can't be like, hey, it should be Nick. It's a self-nomination process, right?
Yeah. So it depends on what category we're talking about. For active fellows, the person that is an emergency nurse that is trying to become a fellow needs to go through the application process themselves, and then they will be supported by a sponsor who also needs to be a fellow in the Academy that will write a sponsor letter for them. And then there's a second letter that needs to be written, and that could be written by any member of ENA. So you're a member of ENA, you're eligible to write that second letter. And the responsibilities between those two people are quite different. So when you're talking earlier about the person needs to nominate themselves, it could very well be a fellow reaching out to them saying, hey, you've done some great work. You're ready. Let's talk about, applying for the Academy, or let's talk about whether you're ready to apply for the Academy. And it very well may be that you're on that journey, but you got a couple more things to do before they think you're ready to apply. And the fellow sponsor should be mentoring and guiding and coaching that person through that application journey. So
awesome.
So for you as a member that's writing the letter, I guess there's 2 places that I would point you to. One would be, and they're both on the ENA website. You can go to ena.org/FAEN. So ena.org/FAEN. And then there's like 2 buttons that are there. One is the Academy guidelines. It's kind of like our bylaws for the Academy. And then there's another button there that's called the application manual, the AEN application manual. And that application manual will have all of the information that a candidate that is applying to be in the Academy needs to know, but also it would have some information in there as well for you as a member, and that's on page 13 of the application manual is writing guidelines for a letter of recommendation. Kind of gives you some key points. But I think by reading the application manual, you can get to know the Academy a little bit better and understand what we're looking for. I can keep talking about a lot more, but I'll stop there and see.
That at least gets me started. Now, here's what I don't know. So like I've heard of the Academy, but you told me a little bit about the Academy, but like, what does the Academy like do? Like, why would somebody want to be a member of the Academy? Like it sounds really cool, but like, it's got to be more than that.
It is. Yeah, it is. There's 2 parts to the Academy. One is the honorific, right? So everyone that you see that puts FAEN behind their name, and it would be towards the end of their credentials, is a fellow in the Academy of Emergency Nursing. So that's the honorific component,
which is cool. You don't see that too often. So you're like
about 200 times, right? A little over 200 times.
When you think of how many ER nurses there are, that's pretty.
We have a lot of work to do. And well, and that's the thing. I think that there's a not to dissuade the significance of the enduring and substantial contributions of us 200 people, but there's a lot of great work going on out there and a lot of enduring contributions that we need to do a better job of identifying and recruiting and recognizing. And so, that's one of the reasons why I'm talking to you now, is to try to hit maybe a different audience in a different light and saying there's other avenues out there where people may be ready, potentially. And if not, at least let's begin the conversation. So the honorific, to your original question, is what does the Academy do? The honorific is the first part. the second part goes back to our mission, is really to provide visionary leadership to ENA and to the specialty. And there's a variety of ways that we do that. One of which is obviously just serving on national committees, serving on national work groups, being the go-to for some particular work. But I think on top of that, it's, what is next? What's coming on the horizon for the emergency nursing specialty, and what do we need to do around research and education and practice and advocacy around what's coming around the horizon for us in our specialty. And as part of visionary leaders for the specialty, we need to be searching that out, identifying it, and providing recommendations. We will be launching a new program within the Academy this year called the Trailblazer Program to address part of that component, kind of a pseudo think tank in small work teams, if you will. So,
I like that.
Yeah.
Now, my first experience with the Academy was as a nurse. I remember a few years back, there was the Eminence Program.
Yeah.
And the Eminence Program, for those of you who hadn't heard of it, basically what they did was they paired up an up-and-coming nurse with a fellow of the Academy to work on a project. And you picked a different project you wanted to work on somewhere, things like government relations, membership stuff, professional presentations was the one that I did. And I forgot what else. There's a few different things that they could potentially have a focus on, like curriculum design and stuff like that. And they would pair you up. So it was like, these brand new up and coming nurses get paired up with like truly legends in emergency nursing, like people who are very experienced in doing whatever they did. And I remember when I first heard about it, I was like, okay, that sounds really cool. That sounds like something I might be interested in. And I remember calling up Jeff Solheim and saying, hey, tell me about the fellowship. What do you know about it? And he's like, oh, it sounds like a really cool thing. And I can't remember if he was a fellow at the time. He must have been. I don't know if he was or not. And he said, they've been asking me to mentor somebody through the fellowship. And I've been thinking about it. I was like, wow, that'd be really cool. Somebody would be really lucky to have you. And I was like, I think I'm going to go ahead and apply. And so I did. I applied. And then what do you know? I got paired with Jeff Solheim. How cool is this?
It's a small world, right?
Right? Like small world. And he told me, he's like, well, he goes, remember I gave you the advice of, applying for this program? I said, yeah. He goes, well, you drew that short straw. He goes, you get me as a mentor. And I'm like, that sounds okay.
So I guess that answers your question of you couldn't remember if he was a fellow at the time or not, right?
So I guess he must have been a fellow. Would you have to be a fellow to be part of that?
Yeah, with the Eminence Program, yes. And Jeff was inducted in 2008. So,
I don't remember.
Well, I looked it up while you were talking because I was curious. He was and that's available for everyone as well. You can go to ena.org/FAEN, and there's the directory of fellows, and there's a list of every person that's been inducted through the 2020 class. We don't have the 2021 class up there yet, but they should be up there shortly. And then the credentials that are listed there are the credentials that they had at the time of their induction. So it's not like that's a dynamic list. That's at the time that they were inducted. So
now I'm looking at that list, and it really is a who's who of like movers and shakers in emergency nursing. I mean, people who, authors, leaders, incredible people. That these are all names that I think most of my audience would probably recognize, at least a few of, and then some that maybe you don't recognize that may be kind of more behind the scenes. But this is really this is an impressive list of people.
Yeah. So if you're thinking, why were they inducted, right? On that same page before you clicked on the directory, there's a link to the YouTube induction from 2021. And I think one of the benefits of, us having a virtual conference in 2020 and 2021 is that, we had to move our induction to a virtual induction. So what was normally, at an invitation event, right, is now widestreamly available. I think I just made up a word there, but available via live stream, or you can just look on YouTube and you can listen to the bios of all of the people that were inducted. And I should note that although the bios are short, those are bios that were written by the Academy board at the time on why the Academy board, based on the application, is inducting this person. So it's really not the person themselves saying this is why I got inducted. It's the people that reviewed the application and said, this is why this person is being inducted into the academy. So nice. I think that, and it's short and sweet, which is part of one of the challenges actually in the application is to articulate all of an applicant's contributions in a short and succinct message.
Yeah.
So, but for you in writing a letter for this person, I would think about a couple of things. One is you could just write the letter, but you don't know what they're putting in their application. They really need to give you their application and their essay so that you can respond to that. But the role of writing the letter is not just to, restate what's in the application. You really want to amplify it, right? So an example of that would be, let's say a person has done some research on suicide screening. I'm just making this up as an example, and this is their significant and enduring contribution. They've created a new suicide screening tool unique to emergency departments. It's quick and easy. It's highly, it's got high sensitivity and high specificity, and that's their enduring and substantial contribution. So they're writing about that, and the fellow sponsor is going to write from the angle of maybe they're also a researcher, and so they're going to talk about the research aspect of it. And then the member that's writing the letter could potentially be an educator that's talking about, oh, this is so easy to educate about. It's not as complex as, this tool or that tool. Or you have a leader that's implemented in their emergency department and says, hey, we implemented this. Our compliance rate has gone way up. And oh, by the way, we've had some really great catches. And these are the great catches that we've had. Or you've got a nurse that's now using the tool and they talk about how much they like it because one, they're catching things that they didn't catch before, and two, it's just more user friendly. So you're getting the same story but through a different lens and a different experience, and potentially someone that's benefited from the contributions rather than just someone saying, "Yeah, I know them and they're doing a great job and here's a way," but through the lens of someone that's benefited from it. Wow, that's powerful stuff.
That's kind of cool.
It's not a requirement, but it really does amplify the story, which is the recommendation. So is to amplify that story.
So she sent me she sent me some stuff. She sent me her CV, which was good because I wanted to look at like what exactly what credentials she has and stuff. She sent me what I'm assuming is part of her letter. Basically, she talked about her contribution to emergency nursing in her sphere. Okay. Which is significant. I mean, she's doing some cool stuff.
Yeah.
And it's, what I can say is, it's not global, but it doesn't sound like it has to be. Like it sounds like
it does need to have broad impact. So if you go to the shared mental model on the application manual, and that's on page 4 of the application manual, there's a section there called the Path of Fellowship Shared Mental Model. And that's what we look for in reviewing the applications. It's right there. The first thing is influence, that the applicant influences emergency nursing at the local, state, regional, national, and or international levels. And then for enduring and substantial contributions, it does need to have broad influence. Now, the broad influence is not defined there for you. Okay. So yeah, there is some significant local impacts. Obviously, if there's an impact that's at a larger sphere, it's easier to say that that's significant and enduring, but it does need to have broad influence. And there's the other check marks that are there as well, but that's the model that we use and look at. That's the lens that the Academy Board looks at when the applications are reviewed. And we have a very, very robust review process in using the shared mental model that we go through to review them. And I should note, we only, look at what is in the application. So, Anita Dorr and Judy Keller are in the Academy, but let's just use those two as examples as if they weren't in the Academy and both of them were alive and they were submitting an application. They may be, the founding members of the Emergency Nurses Association, but if their application doesn't reflect that, they would not get in. And I'm not kidding. We literally go exactly what's in the application and nothing more. So I think that's very important to keep in mind. Depending upon whether someone has name recognition or not. And the reason is to make sure that it's a level playing field, that we're able to recognize and identify enduring and substantial contributions for the people that are less known. within at least our sphere, but are still making great, substantial, and enduring contributions that we don't know about. So,
and I was gonna ask that question because well, I know, and people I know would know this person. Like this person's had a significant impact in her area, to where like everyone I know would know her. It's not necessarily going to be a name you recognize, but that's not the point. The point is whether or not this they're making the impact locally, and she's making the impact locally, but she's also doing some stuff that is at the more national level, where she's having an even greater impact than maybe locally.
Great.
But she's not necessarily a name that, like, if I told you this name, it wouldn't be someone you'd be like, oh, I know her. Like you may not know her, but she's doing cool things. And once you read about that, you're gonna be like, all right, this lady's making an impact, and that's what matters.
The other thing that we do, and this is going to be new this year, is we're actually blinding the letters. So it's not possible. I guess you could, but it's not really possible to blind the application itself, right? I mean, at some point in time, to what people are going to understand who it was, and so we don't blind the application. But starting this year, we are blinding the letters. So the ENA staff will verify that the fellow is a fellow in good standing and is able to write the letter. Because there are some fellows that, for a variety of reasons, are not able, such as those that are on the Academy board, like me, and those that are on the ENA board. They can't write letters because they're in the review and approval process. Yeah. But beyond that, once that occurs, then the letter itself is blinded in terms of who it's coming from. So again, just trying to level the playing field, that hypothetically, if there was a letter that was coming from Anita Dorr or Judy Keller, right, that the weight of that would be the same as if it was a letter coming from Nick Shimolusky, if I was eligible to write, right? That it
Gotcha.
Doesn't, yeah.
So the letter stands on its own rather than like any kind of name recognition.
There's no name recognition, but the letter is used in conjunction with the other components of the application,
of course,
for an overall weighting. Yeah. Also and I keep referring to this application manual, but it's got everything that you need in it. I mean, if you go to the bottom of page 6 of it, Kevin, it actually, we kind of publish our high level weighting there, of how the application is weighted at a high level. So, and then right before that, there's actually a self-assessment. So there's an opportunity for anyone that's interested in the Academy to go through each of these checklists and say, do I meet each of these criteria? And that would mean that you're potentially ready to apply.
Where's the criteria?
The weighting of the criteria is at the bottom of page 6. It's the 3 bullet points at the bottom.
Yeah. And then when are the applications due?
Yeah, they're due February 18th at noon Central. February
18th. So by the time we release this, we'll probably be maybe, I would guess probably early next week, probably maybe Sunday night next week. Now's the time. Like if you're like now, it's not too late to start thinking about this year, is it? But
it's not too late. I mean, so if you're thinking, gosh, I might be ready, and you don't have a sponsor lined up, you may want to talk about reaching out to a sponsor and talking about next year. One of the benefits, one of the recent changes that we made with this year's application cycle is the fellows used to be limited to the number of people they were allowed to sponsor each year.
And that had to be tough.
I think we've removed that limit now. So there's no limit to the number of letters a fellow can write. The question is a fellow able to put together a quality product in a 2-week time period if you're just starting to think about it on February 4th, or someone's reaching out to you on February 10th saying, hey, I want to join the Academy. Can you write something for me in the next week? That can be very tough to do. And some of the fellows may say yes. You may have a fellow say, not this year, but let's talk about writing an application for you next year. So, whether someone is listening today and thinking about, gosh, I want to do it now and jumps right on it, that's great. On the flip side, if this just promotes some more awareness about what the Academy is out there doing, and for someone to strive to, as a goal maybe that they have is to become a fellow in 5 years or 10 years, or, to figure out what what their legacy is in their profession going to be, because that's one of the components of enduring and substantial contributions, is that it really leaves a legacy. Joanne Fadali said it well once a couple of years ago in a session that we were given on the Academy, and she said, the question is when you die, how are your colleagues in emergency nursing going to remember you? And not the colleague that you worked with, that was at the same hospital, but the colleague that was in another state, or the colleague that was, that you saw at an ENA conference once a year, or the colleague that you connect with how are they going to remember you? And if you can't answer that question, then we need to start talking about, well, how do you want to be remembered, and what would that enduring and substantial contribution
what would that
be?
look like?
Yeah. So
that's a great way to put it. It's a great way to put it, to be like, because I think about certainly in our spheres, right? There's people who had great influence on me. There's people who had great influence on a department. There's people who have great influence on maybe a state chapter. But there's a limited number of folks, maybe, not many, over 200, that have had influence on the practice of emergency nursing.
I think that there's a lot more that are out there than 200. It's a matter of us identifying it and recognizing it and being able to reach them, which again is one of the reasons why I think we need to look at going through other channels to reach out to those people. Because you mentioned the word earlier, state chapter. It's, to be clear, this is not about what you've done for ENA. This is about what you've done for the specialty. So the minimum criteria is 3 years of membership in ENA. So for this application cycle, you must be a voting member of ENA in the 2019 calendar year, 2020, and 2021. If you don't have that, we're stopping right there. It's not even possible. But assuming that you have that, then it's, what are your enduring substantial contributions to the specialty? You may have never held a leadership role in ENA, but created this new suicide screen that I, just randomly made up, or, you've developed a sustainable educational program to reach rural emergency departments in a state. And that's got some mechanism that's in place where it just continues to go, and it's self-funding. And, all of these nurses are able to get this education that normally is difficult to get if you're not in a large city or in an area where there's a lot of educational offerings. So, those are just some things to think about, but, there's disaster nursing out there. What contributions have you made around disaster nursing? What contributions in public policy have been made related to scope of practice or workplace violence reduction or things of that nature? So there's some other resources, though, for people that are interested. For those that did register for EN21, there's a whole session that Garrett Chan, who was last year's chair, and myself, last year's chair elected, called Tips and Tricks for a Successful Academy Application. And we literally spend about 45 minutes to an hour walking through the application manual, walking down what have been some common themes in unsuccessful applications, what are some themes in successful applications, do a further deep dive in a very structured format about how can you set yourself up for success. So I believe, if I remember correctly, that EN21 is available till January 31st. So, there's still some time for people to go in and listen to that. For those that are going to leadership orientation within ENA, Andy Foley, who's this year's chairperson-elect, and myself will be doing a much smaller session, but we'll also attach to that session from EN21, the tips and tricks. But here's the other thing I think to think about. A lot of your listeners, though, are newer nurses, right, Kevin? Or still at the...
Probably. Yeah. I mean, I think there's a, and this is just a guess, but my guess, most of my podcast listeners tend to be on the younger age, maybe a little earlier in their career, maybe not. Certainly don't want to offend anyone. If you're, a very senior ER nurse and listening to the podcast, certainly don't want to offend you. But I think most are probably newer into their career. I'd say more than more likely to get the newer nurse than probably the more seasoned nurse.
So you brought up the Eminence program. So let's talk about the Eminence program, because
it's not still around.
Well, kind of. So, some of the challenges that existed with the Eminence program was you had to go to the conference. It was, at least at the time, and the way it was structured, it had a set start date and a set end date.
Yep.
And if you didn't go to the conference, then you were kind of missing out. And that wasn't just for the mentee, but that was also for the fellow that was the mentor, that they had to go. Yeah. And that created some operational challenges. And, some people don't want to go through a whole year program. So in 2018, I think the year is, ENA was at a point where they had this platform and it's through Connect and able to launch mentorship available through Connect. And it's called the ENA mentoring program. And so kind of what has happened is Eminence has rolled into the ENA mentoring program that's available through Connect. And we're really pushing fellows to sign, assuming that they're available and they have the capacity to do so, sign yourself up and make yourself available as a mentor. And so for any ENA member that is looking for mentorship, there's a couple ways that you can achieve it. One is, Kevin, or Jeff Solheim, or somebody that knows somebody that can put the two of you together and then have a mentoring relationship that way. But the other way is you can actually just go into Connect and look and search for mentors. And there's no automated matching that goes on in the back end with the mentoring program. So if you're a mentee and you want to be mentored, you need to kind of search for that mentor that's available that fits the things that they selected and figure out if this is going to be a good fit, and then send them a mentor request. And then you exchange emails and you set up a time to talk. And it's really, on your own mentoring, if you will, which means that depending upon what your goal is, that mentorship program for you, it may last 6 weeks, it may last 6 years, right? Interestingly enough, I am signed up as a mentor right now in the mentoring program, but I'm actually being mentored by 2 other ENA members. That's awesome. I'm both a mentor and a mentee, and I've got some goals that I want to achieve, some personal goals, and they're helping me with that. And I didn't find them on the platform. I knew them and picked up the phone and called them. But, at the same point in time, it was like, okay, well, if we're going to do this, then let's record this, that we're doing this, and establish that type of relationship. So, awesome. So and the Academy board does review, the utilization of that program and how things are going. So it's not the Eminence program, but we still have mentorship that's available. And joining the Academy board this year is Patty Howard, who is also the provost of ENA University. So one of the things we'll be looking at this year is what does that look like? How do we provide mentorship within the mentoring program, and what role does ENA University have, which the Academy doesn't have a formal relationship in, but how can those things intersect so that we can provide the best service and development to emergency nurses that have development goals that they want to achieve. Yeah. So yeah.
That's pretty exciting. That's kind of cool.
For those newer nurses, the Academy is certainly something that's in reach. Probably not now because they've been a nurse 2 or 3 years. Yeah. But think about saying yes to opportunities when they're put in front of you. I mean, I was reluctant about a lot of things, kind of like okay, let's see how this goes. When someone kind of opens the door and says, hey, you should do this. It's good for you, or it'd be a good opportunity for you. And my first General Assembly was 14 years ago. Yeah. And 7 years after that, I was inducted, and now I'm the chairperson of the Academy this year. And it's crazy to think about, and also to think about the other people that are, I'm just thrilled to be a member of the group, let alone to be on the board. So, right. It's very, very humbling. But if anything is possible for people that want to be engaged in their specialty and, being engaged in your profession and practice it with passion.
Yeah, so. I think that's, I say that all the time, is that emergency nursing is a big, there's lots and lots and lots of emergency nurses. There's less that are actively involved. There's less that are members of the ENA. Right. There are even less that are engaged members. And there are even less than that are actively very engaged members. And it's kind of cool to be one of those people. Like if you can be one of those people, it's kind of a cool thing to be able to do. So.
But I mean, I think for me, it completely happened by a fluke, Kevin.
Yeah.
I mean, really, I went to my first conference because the physician group at the hospital I was working with, they send one CEN a year, and my name got literally drawn out of a hat.
That's awesome.
And so, I'm going to Salt Lake City. It was 2007. And, about 3 weeks before, one of the nurses in the department that was active in ENA. Because like you, I became a member within a week of getting my nursing license because it was the thing to do. But I didn't go to any meetings because I didn't know anybody. And I kind of just was I paid my dues, and and I read Connection, and that was about it. Yeah. And so, one of the nurses I was working with, Nicole McGarity, said, "Hey, we've got this thing. It's called General Assembly. It's 2 days before the conference. Come out a couple days early. We've got some open spots. You should be a delegate." And Ohio pays for their delegates, but because I didn't meet the deadline, they're like, "You wouldn't be." But she's like, "But it's, the docs group are paying for you anyways. You don't need that. It'd be good for you." And I'm like, how do I prepare? I don't know what I'm going to. She's, "Don't worry about it. Just come and meet people and talk." And my goodness, hook, line, and sink. After that first day, I'm like, this is addicting. I'm going to be at this thing every year, and I think I've missed one, I
got to tell you that, one of the things I always say is if we can get every emergency nurse to just attend General Assembly once, we'll absolutely have them hooked.
Yeah. Yeah. But from that, 1 year, I think I wrote a letter a couple of years later to Diane Gurney, who was the president that year, and just said, "Hey, here's some things that I would recommend, looking for next year, or some things to think about," and spent a lot of time. Never expected to get a response. And I got a response from her, and she said, "You should apply to be on the resolutions committee. We're looking for people with ideas like this." And okay. So I applied, and, the appointments came from Anne Marie Papa, but I got appointed, and now I'm on a national committee 3 or 4 years after I first go to my meeting. I mean, it's amazing how quickly things can change, even at a national level. It's not difficult to get involved, and it's surely not difficult to accelerate your career. That I would not have the job that I have today if it were not for, those steps in ENA, going all the way back to that doc group and my name being drawn out of the hat. So cool. I'm so grateful.
Yeah. So I got to tell you, the first one I went to, it just, it got me excited. I was super excited to be there. And when you realize that you can have an impact on the practice of emergency nursing.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool. Like, who doesn't want to have an influence? Who doesn't want, and that's kind of like the kind of cool thing about the fellowship. These are people who've influenced their profession. Like, who doesn't want to be somebody who's influenced their profession? Like, everybody wants to be someone like
that. Yeah.
Like, when you think back and you think to yourself, okay, did I make an impact? Did I make a difference while I was here? Then you would know. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So. Yep, I agree. I'm in the same boat, man. I was just thrilled. I remember getting picked for conference committee to be on the conference planning, and I was just like, man, I was just through the moon, to the moon, just going, holy cow, what a cool opportunity to.
That's a hard committee to get on too, or so I've heard. That's difficult to get on. I don't know the best.
Yeah, because it's well, I mean, I think any committee. Well, I mean, I shouldn't say any committee is hard, but the committees are hard. But that is one of the harder ones because it's like everyone wants to be part of planning. It's like party planning. Everyone wants to be part of the party plan.
I would not have the career that I had today if it were not for ENA, hands down.
And I got to tell you, I mean, like, some of the people in ENA have been like some of my best friends, people who've meant a lot to me, who've mentored me, who've, poured themselves into me and helped me in any way they could. And it's just been cool, man. I'm super pumped to be part of this group. I owe a lot to the organization, and that's what I feel. And that's when I feel like I want to run for an office, it's because I want to give back to the organization that's given me so much.
Well, that's the right reason to do it, right?
Yeah. And recently I was talking to Stephen Jewell not that long ago. We had dinner sometime last year, and we were talking, and he's like, "Dude, are you ever going to run for the board?" And I'm like, "Absolutely. At some point I will run for the board." And he's like, "You should do it. You should do it." And I was like, "I will one of these days." I was like, "I'm super excited to see you on there." And so that's it'll be interesting to see if that ever comes to be. But
you could be on the board at the same time with him. Who knows?
Yeah, I don't know that I'll run that soon. Like, I don't think, I thought about maybe this year throwing my name in the ring and just kind of seeing what happens, and knowing full well that it may not be, like, not everybody gets on their first time.
Yeah.
And Dina Brescher was kind enough to remind me that some people need to run more than once to get on the board. And she's right. And I just think to myself, maybe someday. So
yeah.
I get those delusions of grandeur. Like, I could do that. So, because it's just kind of cool when you meet somebody who's like, former board member, and you're like, oh, it's kind of cool. Like I remember talking to somebody, and it was a name I didn't recognize, and he was a consultant for a company that was doing some work with us in Texas. And I remember talking to him, and I remember him saying that he was a longtime member of ENA, and then he just happened to mention, he used to be on the national board, and I was all, like it was a name I'd never heard of. And then I Googled him, and I was like, oh yeah, like he was on the board for a while. Like he was on the board for a little bit. I can't for the life of me remember his name now, but I remember going, okay, like this guy was the real deal. Like he was national board ENA for a little while. So,
well, it's interesting you mentioned that. A colleague of mine at work, he had a family member that recently passed. She had a great life. She was, elderly. And he was talking about, she was an emergency nurse, and it's like, oh, okay. She was one of the founding members of a chapter in Florida. And,
nice.
And so he starts, sending us pictures. And I've got this picture of her, that's in her obituary of her being in her late 80s. And then you've got this picture from her in the early mid 70s, like 3 or 4 years after Edna, right? Not ENA, but Edna was founded. And on her nursing cap, she's got the Roadrunner pin on her nursing cap.
That's so cool.
Like, that's so cool. We gotta let me have that picture. Give me some other details. We gotta send that into the office for the memoriam, for General Assembly, because this is cool stuff. Makes you wonder, like, be a fly on the wall in those early days, in New York and in Michigan before the offices were in Chicago, and thinking, what were things like, with those pioneers in the early days.
Yeah. It's kind of crazy. You think to yourself, like, of all the emergency nurses there are, throughout the world, like when you get to like a small group of like the ENA, like you're like, wow, that's kind of cool. Like, these people who are like actively involved in their professions and leading their profession and like doing cool shit. And, you're like, that's kind of cool. It's kind of cool to think. And, I think everybody wants to make an impact on their profession. I mean, I certainly have always wanted to and done my best to. Everyone always wants to make an impact on their profession. But when you look back and you're like going, yeah, like I made, this is the impact you made. And to be able to look back and say that's pretty cool.
Well, filling out that application and writing the essay, that's an interesting exercise to do. And it's both humbling and I think that as nurses, we have a hard time sometimes of, I don't want to use the word brag, but of clearly articulating our role in successes that have occurred.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's the time to do it. And then to recognize, wow, this person has done really cool stuff that needs to be recognized.
Yeah.
So
I was kind of looking at the application as I was looking over the application for the letter I'm writing. I was kind of looking over it going, like, you just think to yourself, okay, that's kind of cool to be able to say, like, you've had that kind of impact on a profession. Like, how humbling is that? Like, that's super humbling. So that's kind of cool.
It's a cool exercise for anyone to go through in their career. And for even someone that, okay, you've been a nurse for 5 years. Yeah, you're probably likely not ready, but open up the application and see what you can write about yourself, about what you've done for your profession since you've become a nurse.
Yeah, that's a good question.
And maybe that's an opportunity to just set some goals for yourself of, gosh, I've been an ER nurse for 5 years and I don't have my CEN, or, I don't have my CPEN, or whatever the case may be. Or, I want to be a TNCC, course faculty member so that then I can start working on revisions or whatever the case may be. It's a good self-assessment too.
So it definitely make you think, that's for sure. So that's cool.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me, and I took up way more time than I expected. But I really appreciate you taking the time to go through this with me and help me out in one, get my mind right to write the letter, but two, sharing the information about the Academy with the audience. So I think that's pretty awesome.
You're most welcome. Thank you for having me. And if you have any questions, you can email academy@ena.org.
There you go. Awesome.
Yeah. Cool.
Well, Nick, thank you so much. I appreciate it, sir.
Thanks for listening to the Art of Emergency Nursing podcast. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on Facebook.